to find out who all is on the phone. So I've got Jerome
Yes.
and Natalie.
And Natalie, we're working on the study around the racing and betting.
Okay.
Okay.
So the two of you, is Emily on the phone?
Yes.
Okay. So my career has been primarily in horse racing, and started, 30 plus years ago as a horseman. Moved into Horsemen's Association management, always around racing and breeding, both thoroughbred and quarter horse racing in America. Around 2006, the company I was working for, which was YouBet.com, one of the first online wagering companies in America, acquired a company called United Tote. United Tote is a totalizator company, and I ran United Tote for about 4 years, while United Tote handled the customers, Churchill Downs and New York Racing Association and Keeneland and several others. Churchill ultimately purchased YouBet.com and got United Tote with it, of course. And I went to work for Amtote, which was a United Tote competitor.
Mm-hmm.
Amtote, American Totalizator, at that time had just completed its buyout of its partners on Amtote. So Stronach Group owns multiple racetracks in America, and as well as ExpressBet and what have you. And while at Amtote, I was senior VP of sales and traveled the world, literally following up on the United Tote experience, where we had customers in South Korea and the Philippines and South America, etc. So at Amtote, they also had several international customers in South Africa and South America, Australia, some in UK and many in North America. And we, at Amtote, we went from about 35% of the market share among the three major providers to more than 70% market share. So when I left Amtote last summer, we had been ramping up and revitalizing our tote system and doing a lot of work for our sports wagering system, because our primary client for sports was Tabcorp in Australia, and they used the Amtote sports betting system for their 4 billion plus fixed odds sports business. So my experience is a lot of horse racing, a lot of operational management and leadership positions in horse racing, and a lot of sales, a lot of 6-month, 9-month, even 18-month sales cycle kinds of deals. Multi-site, multi-platform, multi-million-dollar sales deals. So that's kind of my background in short summary.
Okay.
The betting business in North America is pretty dynamic at the moment, in particular, and I think your inquiry is very timely, because there's a lot going on, specifically in North America.
Okay. Well, thank you for this introduction, Jeff. There are several questions I would like to ask you. I just want to take note of them so that we don't lose them. Just following up on your introduction.
Okay.
Just on the players you mentioned, United Tote and Amtote. What was the reason for the rationale for YouBet.com to acquire United Tote? We don't need to answer right now, because maybe we can follow a more logical order, and it would be interesting for you to give us a picture of how United Tote and Amtote differentiate, and what are the recent development, because from the outside, both companies seem to be very traditional, and if you look up their website, both seem to be a little dated. So it's interesting that you mentioned that you were revamping your product range. But maybe we can start with the market, and you mentioned horse races and sports betting. What are for you are they really different markets, or are they becoming increasingly a common betting market, which could include also online, which could include online poker and that kind of thing?
So that's a lot to unpack. So let me start with this. The market in North America is very different from most any other market around the world, save some similarities to Asia, East Asia. In North America, specifically the U.S., but also Canada, and expressly excluding Mexico, the pari-mutuel market is completely separate from the fixed odds market. Completely separate in the sense that the only place that you can legally do fixed odds wagering in North America are Nevada, Delaware, Montana, and Delaware, I believe.
You already mentioned Delaware. As Nevada?
Delaware, Montana, Nevada, maybe it's Oregon. At any rate, Nevada does the lion's share, 95% plus, of all fixed odds wagering in North America on the legal market. There's estimates of $150 billion in illegal wagering handled by offshore companies, illegal companies, and that separation has really been what's driven wagering in North America for the last, call it 40 years. In 1978, Congress passed the Interstate Horse Racing Act that really sort of codified the interstate wagering in North America, all pari-mutuel. In 92, they passed a law called PASPA, Professional Amateur Sports Protection Act, which basically outlawed fixed odds wagering in any place outside those 4 states I mentioned. And the states were given an opportunity to participate at that time, and none of them did, save those other 3 minor states. Nevada was doing the lion's share, and at that time it was a very minor market. In 1992, Nevada was probably doing in the range of 500, 600 million, and that's grown 8-fold since then. So when you think about the wagering market in North America, the legal market is pari-mutuel. The legal restricted market is fixed odds, and that's only in Nevada. In pari-mutuel, there's 37 of the 50 states enable pari-mutuel wagering, and 70, probably 85% of that is horse racing. There's a minor part in Highlight and Greyhound. It's probably Greyhound has fallen so much as probably 90, maybe 92+% is now all horse racing, which would be thoroughbred primarily, then standard bred for harness racing, then quarter horse racing, which only is doing about 300 million a year. There's very minor jump racing. So the operators, as a result of those market delineations, have concentrated their efforts where they can make money. So there's 3 major pari-mutuel operators in North America: United Tote, Amtote, SportsAct. There is a 4th operator, but that 4th operator is limited to Nevada only. That 4th operator, Las Vegas Disseminators, started out as a company that just disseminated information, and they provided all the 80+ sports books in Nevada with horse racing connections, meaning data connections, wager processing, etc. And they are the only operator in Nevada by contract and almost by legislation, but it's kind of an odd deal there where nobody else can really get in there. It's a single operator state, but Las Vegas Disseminators doesn't host any pools. They only transfer wagers from the casinos to the host track, to the host tote, and then back again.
Okay.
So for a long, long time, United Tote, SportTech, and AmTote equally divided the markets. As you may have seen in, probably around 2000, 2002, right around that range, we peaked out in North America at about $15 billion in pari-mutuel handle. That's all of North America, including Canada.
Sorry, how much do you say?
15 billion.
I think 15 billion US.
Okay.
Around 2002, 2003, something like that, and later in that first decade of the century, it started falling off. And I think it's right now that we've rebounded a little bit. It's down around 11.5, 12 billion now. Each of the companies in that same time frame had about 30% of the market share. And United Tote, as I mentioned, was purchased by Churchill Downs in 2009. United Tote's customers were Churchill, NYRA, Keeneland. They had TwinSpires.com, which was Churchill's ADW company. So that was a big chunk of the highest quality market share. AmTote at that time had the Stronach Group tracks, which included Gulfstream, Santa Anita, Golden Gate, and the Maryland Jockey Club. AmTote also had, SportTech had Woodbine and a multitude of smaller tracks. So it was kind of equally divided in total dollars, but the quality of the product was leaning towards Churchill.
Mm-hmm.
And to some degree, AmTote, if you believe Gulfstream and Santa Anita, compete with NYRA and Churchill Downs. So fast forward to 2009, I moved from United Tote to AmTote, and my express goal, the reason that I went to AmTote, was to try and win NYRA product, NYRA contests. So it took about 2.5 years, but we accomplished that. And that AmTote was able to gather. After we landed NYRA, let me back up. Previous to my coming to AmTote acquired Woodbine from SportTech, and they did that in 2007 or 8. United Tote, which I was running at the time, we bid on Woodbine, but they chose AmTote at the time. And then again, 2009, I moved over. We got NYRA in 2000. I think we won it in 12 and deployed in 13. And then
Were the
14.
sorry, were the solutions very different, or what was the reason for the customers to switch from one supplier to the other?
That's a great question, and one that, as a salesman, I could probably talk about on end for quite a while. But the short story, Woodbine switched to AmTote. The reasoning we got from them, and even when they were our customer, we quizzed them a bit. AmTote had a much more dynamic, much more open system. And Woodbine was the kind of company that had some very smart people. They wanted to design their own user interfaces. They wanted to design their own platform, if you will, and use the AmTote APIs to create those platforms, create those those user interfaces and use Amtote as the betting engine. And so that's what they set about doing. They created their own ADW platform and integrated it with their on-track experience. They took the Amtote framework and helped design with Amtote the user interface for the terminals, the self-service terminals in particular.
Mm-hmm.
They helped redesign the teller terminal, and really Woodbine had a lot to do because they went in and totally forced Amtote to the table to come up with pathways and APIs that would streamline Woodbine's business. Woodbine really wanted to reduce their employee overhead and wanted to go completely self-service using on-track accounts, on-track mobile platforms, and really give the power in the bet placement to the customer. So that really, from Woodbine's perspective, they weren't getting that from Sportech. Sportech, previously Amtote, previously not Amtote. Sportech was previously Scientific Games,
Right.
and prior to that was Autotote. And those companies, even in their succession, while they did get some investment from Games, their company was stale. Their software was stale. Their source code was stale. They weren't very customer friendly in most customers' eyes. And I had been a customer of Sportech and Autotote back in the 90s when I was running racetracks and working in California racetracks. Sportech was just, they were the low cost provider. That's what they brought to the table. United Tote was a high quality provider. Amtote was somewhere in the middle. And with Woodbine, Amtote really came to the fore because of the work that they did with Woodbine and their user interface, their API, and their back-end performance. So I think when we came to NYRA, we said to NYRA, look, here's the things that we've developed. If you want to look like Woodbine, if you want to be like Woodbine in terms of integrating all your platforms, then here's a look at our APIs. Here's a look at our software development team. Here's a look at our operational outline. Here's what we can do for you. And they believed it, and we went about executing it and delivering it. And so while for a long time we were saying that Woodbine was the premier horse racing operator in North America, given their multitude of racetracks, multitude of operations, including casino, NYRA being a new casino partner with Genting, felt like Amtote was the solution, and I think they've benefited from that decision because they went in and got Global Wagering to develop a website for them, and we worked 18 months on that platform and delivered what is now NYRA Bets, and integrated NYRA Bets into everything that NYRA does on track, including the single account portability between online, mobile, and on-site at the terminal. We delivered all that with redundancy between two disparate data centers, and I could go on and on, but that's really what drove those decisions.
Okay. Now this is 100% horse racing bets, right? Or majority horse racing and some very minority greyhound and stuff. But
No, it's all horse racing.
yes. What about other betting sports such as sports or lottery? How does that articulate with the horse racing bets, if at all?
There are no operators in North America doing fixed odds sports and pari-mutuel, period.
Okay.
It's not allowed. And then I should say that in Mexico, they do have fixed odds and pari-mutuel, typically provided by, I say typically, there's about a dozen license holders in Mexico, probably 500 or so outlets, and most of them use a different provider for pari-mutuel than they do sports and fixed odds. Now, that said, Sportech has sold a system or two in Mexico, and I know of a couple of the operators that use Sportech for both fixed odds and pari-mutuel. In North America, in U.S., I should say, in United States and Canada, there's no one doing both because it's just not legal. Mm-hmm. Now, all that's about to change, we believe, and Amtote, as I mentioned, has a fixed odds system that operates the Tabcorp uses for their $4 billion sports business in Australia. Sportech has a fixed odds business that they have sold to an operator in western Mexico. I think they also operate fixed odds in some other markets, but I'm not as in tune with what those markets are. But typically they've sold their system and don't really operate it and have very little support for it. Mm. The Amtote model is such that they provide the software, they support it, they have a team dedicated to Australia to support the changes and the upgrades that Australia needs.
Right.
But as you may know, the U.S. Supreme Court is looking at a case involving New Jersey, and there's a decision supposed to come out in the next 30 days that may or may not open up sports wagering throughout the rest of the U.S. Mm-hmm. There's a chance that they have a limited decision that only affects New Jersey, but if everyone believes that if they decide only for New Jersey and not for the entire U.S., that many other states in the U.S. will model what New Jersey did and thereby increase fixed odds capability throughout the U.S.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And what
so in terms of other types of betting, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. What is the percentage of each extra today in the market? What is the market share of Scientific Games, Amtote, and United Tote today?
So Amtote is probably in the 70% neighborhood, 70% of the hosted content in North America. So if you understand, each of the three companies has a list of customers. Each of those three companies will take wagers locally for their customer, but most of those wagers locally will be from other tracks. And most of those other tracks are, all the tracks are hosted by a particular operator. So in other words, when NYRA runs a race, even though that race is wagered upon by hundreds of other locations, all those wagers go into a single hosted pool, and that pool is hosted by Amtote.
Right.
So Amtote hosts Woodbine, NYRA, all the Stronach tracks, probably 30 to 40 other racetracks. And so because of the quality of the NYRA, Woodbine, and Stronach group tracks, they have the majority of the hosted contests. They also host two of the largest ADWs in the country, actually three of the top four, which would be TVG, Betfair, ExpressBet.com, WatchAndWager.com, and probably 5 or 6 other minors. Additionally, Amtote handles the wagering for 3 very large high-volume wagering shops. We call them rebate shops. We call them high-volume or computer-assisted wagering. These are guys that have multiple accounts. They're very high volume, as much as $1 million per day. Some of them as much as $1 billion per year. So these are high-volume shops that have a very highly developed algorithm that take feeds from the tote, that drop in thousands of wagers per red track per day, all based on some high-volume algorithm. Mm. And so a high-volume shop may have as many as 40 or 50 clients underneath it, but the high volume shop delivers its wagers to and to thereby to the host tracks in master accounts. So there's a master account and dozens of sub accounts, and all that accounting is something that Amtote has developed and has become an expert in. But that's kind of the market share. So United Tote and Sportech then share the rest of the, call it 30-35% hosted content.
Okay. From what I understand from what you're telling us, there's no link either with lotteries or casinos, right? It's the horse racing betting is very specific world in North America, and there's no link with other types of betting.
That's correct. That's correct. The lottery is completely separate,
Mm-hmm.
and there are some major lottery operators in the U.S. that do only lottery. The couple of the states like Montana and maybe Delaware have a sports parlay that some of the lottery, it's really a lottery game with some sports labels.
Mm-hmm.
But lottery, horse racing, horse racing to include all pari-mutuel. So when I say horse racing pari-mutuel, I mean also Greyhound, also Highlight. But there is no fixed odds outside of Nevada, and there is no pari-mutuel mixed with fixed odds anywhere in the U.S. or Canada, and there's no lottery. Esports is just now coming around.
Mm-hmm.
There is no proposition wagering in the U.S. and Canada, and the only connection between those, between casino and pari-mutuel is through the CRM system.
Mm-hmm.
Amtote outputs a CRM file, a player rewards points file to third-party CRM companies, which then manage the CRM system for those tracks that have casino and pari-mutuel, so that you can get a guy to walk from the casino player rewards program to the pari-mutuel player rewards program, and his points can be integrated for him to then expend or redeem, based on the program.
Okay. All right.
And even in Australia, where Amtote is an operator for pari-mutuel and fixed odds, Tabcorp has its own pari-mutuel system.
Right.
And so there's no link between the Tabcorp pari-mutuel and the Tabcorp fixed odds.
Okay. Can you elaborate on where a little bit on where United Tote and Sportech stand today, in your view?
Well, I think they are what we would call in the United States as also rans. I mean, Sportech has always been the low-cost provider. And so one of their primary clients is Penn National, Penn Gaming.
Mm-hmm.
Penn Gaming has probably 15 racetracks. Almost all of them have a casino or a racino associated with them. The Penn Gaming revenue model, their business model, is to buy properties which are in non-Indian racing jurisdictions, meaning they don't have to compete with a tribal gaming establishment. They buy small racetracks in middle markets. They develop a high-quality, albeit smaller, casino attachment, and they use horse racing as leverage to get their casino model put in place.
Mm-hmm.
So they're low-cost pari-mutuel operators, and so Sportech is their primary operator. Sportech operates Connecticut OTB on their own, meaning there's no racetrack host in Connecticut. There's no live racing in Connecticut. Sportech operates betting shops throughout that market. They have a variety of other smaller operators. United Tote, to answer your first question, to go all the way back to ubet.com, ubet.com was a pioneer in ADW. It was a public company that started online wagering, actually had what they called an online tote system, which was some, back in the 90s technology. They had a terminal, they had a betting terminal that they basically integrated to the internet, whatever the internet was at the time, and could wager, could take wagers and process wagers in a very slow, limited way at that time. So then they became recapitalized, which is when I came into the group. A new group came in and said, hey, this internet thing looks pretty good. Let's create an online wagering model. And they did that, figured out that they needed a greater connection to the racetracks whose content they were buying and distributing. If you remember the business model at the time, ubet.com was a standalone public company, publicly listed on NASDAQ. And they had to go acquire content from a host track and then sell that content along with data and video streaming to their end customers. Well, most of the states at that time, most of the racetrack operators didn't know anything, right? They were technology averse because the only technology they really dealt with was frame relay and satellite uplink, K-band satellite uplink. So when UBET came along trying to buy the content and sell it to customers, the racetracks thought, well, they are my distributor, but they're also, to some degree, my competitor. Because if a guy's betting at home on his laptop with his desktop tower, he's not coming to the racetrack. UBET saw that and said, well, we need a greater connection to the racetracks themselves. So let's get the tote company. Let's buy the tote company, which is the primary on-track technology. They did that. They happened to buy United Tote, which was for sale from Kinderhook, which is a private capital, venture capital group that acquired it from the founder, which was basically a cowboy from Montana. So next thing you know, ubet.com has this dynamic online distribution model, and they have the on-track technology for NYRA, Keeneland, and Churchill, three of the biggest names in horse racing in the world. Those operators started getting a little nervous. Imagine yourself a track operator with this new technology kind of jumping up in your face, and then all of a sudden that new technology group, which is completely a third party, now owns the technology at your home track. They got nervous. That's why Churchill went in and bought UBET and United Tote. Because Churchill, once UBET started generating $150, $200, $250, $300 million a year in handle, Churchill then started their own online company, called it twinspires.com. They did that through acquisition. Churchill Downs is they're a very acquisitive type of group. They don't build anything organically. They either go buy it or they pay somebody to build it. They don't do anything themselves. So they bought Americatab, which is a small group in Ohio. They bought one other group, and then they bought UBET, which really accelerated their ADW presence in the market. Next thing you know, Churchill's got some of the best content in the world with the Derby, which drives everybody's acquisition of customers business during the year. Now they've got $600-700 million a year in ADW handle. Now they've got a tote company, which, by the way, runs the tote at their own track, as well as other tracks in Kentucky. And at the time, they also had NYRA content. So fast forward to 2009, when Churchill So Churchill acquires that. Fast forward to 2012 or 13, when Naira's bidding their business. They lose the Naira content, but now their ADW is over $1 billion a year. And then Amtote wins the TVG business. Then Amtote wins the California business. That's kind of how the market shook out.
Okay. Where does Sportex stand right now? Because we saw that they divested a number of their activities last year. And they put the group...
They sold their football pool, as I recall, and they've been trying to do that for a long time. They sold it once and then had to buy it back. They've had it for sale for years and years, and there was a lot of talk, even as far back as 2006, that United Tote and Sportech would merge, or that one would buy the other. Then there was a lot of talk about Amtote and Sportech merging, or one buying the other. And none of that has happened. Because basically we decided at Amtote we don't need to buy Sportech. We'll just beat them out of the market.
Yeah.
They're not putting any money into their technology. They're not very good service providers. They're kind of all over the map in terms of what they really want to do. Their focus is not in North America. So, Amtote decided we don't need to buy them. We'll just beat them. Sportech now is still the low-cost provider with probably the least market share. And, I don't, while they have, they have some customers and they have a pretty good international footprint, their international model, at least from the U.S. perspective, is that they will sell their old equipment to foreign operators and then just let that equipment, let that software, let that hardware age out. Let it become obsolete, and then hopefully that customer will then come back and buy new equipment from Sportech. They did build a new terminal in 2006 for California, and all the 3,000 old terminals that they took out of California, they spread around the world. And then when they lost California, they were able to acquire some business because they had relatively new, call it 6-7-year-old equipment that they could then sell to all these international operators at a low cost because they already had it paid for. So Sportech, to me, and I don't know what you guys are thinking about or what you want to do, but if somebody wanted to get into the business in North America, buy Sportech. Go in there and revamp and revitalize their software and hardware and operations. Use Sportech as a shell to penetrate the market. I mean, if I was wanting to get back into the tote business, that's what I'd do.
But is there...
I'd go buy Sportech and try to operate it better than they do.
But is there anything left at Sportech apart from the existing market share and the existing terminals? Because they put the company on for sale in September last year. The CEO and CFO left. It seems like the company is trying to liquidate itself, more or less. And it doesn't seem like...
Yeah. No, I agree with you. That's what it looks like to me. Is there something left? Yes. They have relationships all over the world. They have a fixed odds and pari-mutuel system. I mean, there are very few pari-mutuel systems in the world, right? And those in North America operate, even though Sportech is the third best among the U.S. operators, it's still better than many of the other systems around the world, meaning some of the Asian operators, even the Australian operator, which write and support and manage and develop their own pari-mutuel systems, Sportech is still better than those. Sportech has been operating the UK tote pool for a while, a decade maybe. They operate on every continent on the planet that does pari-mutuel. So there is something there. Could you go through and rationalize the the software support model, the hardware model? Can you graduate or develop the Sportech software to a new hardware model, a third-party hardware model? I mean, that's where to me, the domestic tote business needs to go, and indeed, probably in many other markets around the world. The third-party hardware model is where tote needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, each of the three tote companies builds and develops and supports their own hardware. That's costly. I mean, why do they do it? It's because the tote software, the pari-mutuel model in today's tote world is so specific and so high speed that it's hard to get a third-party hardware manufacturer to get interested because there's low numbers, but there's also a high demand. You know, if I'm a Hewlett Packard or I don't even know if they do hardware anymore, but if I'm a Lexus or any of the hardware developers or hardware makers, it's hard for me to get interested in 10,000 or 15,000 or 20,000 units worldwide.
Right.
It's hard for me to put a team of 50 people on a teller terminal that is going to, that has to retail for less than $4,000.
Mm.
When I've only got 15,000 of them that I can sell. So the tote companies have had to be in the hardware business on their own just to make their model work.
Mm.
All that said, the third-party hardware model or the tablet model, the cloud model,
Mm-hmm.
needs to be developed.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you right now that the Amtote guys are looking at how to get out of the terminal business, out of the hardware business.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But if you go to a racetrack today, 85%. In California, it's maybe as much as, or as little. Let me back this up. What I'm trying to say, the self-service versus the teller-operated bets at a racetrack.
Mm-hmm.
Self-service is anywhere from 10 to 30%, depending on the track and the vendor. Some days you can get it as high as 40% self-service. So that box that the customer is using, that end-user customer, that self-service box is a $4,500, $5,000 box.
Mm.
The teller-operated terminal is a $3,500, $4,000 box. But a teller can produce 3 to 1 the amount of turnover that the self-service box does.
Right.
You with me?
Yes.
So a teller is very important to the live on-track experience. And a teller operator can produce much more handle and much more turnover than a self-service machine can. But a teller is expensive.
Right.
So that's me now as a racetrack operator. I have to balance those dynamics. I have to balance the turnover that a teller operator can do versus the self-service and the cost of the teller operator versus the self-service box.
Right.
And I need to push mobile wagering, quite obviously.
Right. Exactly. That was my next question.
Mobile wagering is a very important part of the future of tote. But what we find is that the throughput. I mean, if you go to the Derby, 150,000 people at the Derby, how many of them can you support on their mobile device, putting in wagers at 1 minute to post to the Derby?
Hmm.
Right?
Right.
How much bandwidth can you pipe into Churchill Downs to make a difference?
Hmm.
Can you handle 5,000, 10,000, 20,000?
Mm.
Can you handle 50? Can you handle 1/3 of the crowd at Derby through
Right.
their mobile phones? You just can't. You simply cannot do it.
Can you
Because
not
the
do?
wager has to be, it has to be a 2 or 3 second turnaround.
Mm-hmm.
Can you
So
not do?
that's the challenge.
Can you not do that using Wi-Fi and systems in the on the racetrack?
I'm specifically talking about Wi-Fi.
Okay.
I mean, the best wireless access points. If you could put a gig circuit, a 1 gig circuit
Mm-hmm.
into Churchill, and you put up 1,000 access points, you're still only going to be able to handle 15, 20,000 people simultaneously.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the challenge. But, that happens half a dozen times a year. Most of the time, you don't have that big a crowd, you don't have that big a demand, and much of your wagering is going to be from somewhere else anyway, and so it's distributed.
Mm.
The reason that we have multiple data centers, the reason that we have one of the reasons I should say, one of the primary reasons that we have so many disparate processing points is because it's a distributed model that leverages all these different sources.
Okay.
That distributed model keeps a single pipeline from becoming overloaded and thereby crashing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just imagine if at Churchill Downs on Derby Day, the only tote operator was United Tote, and they went down. Right? I mean, if United Tote goes down, things do significantly slow down or even halt, but all the other operators are still taking bets that they can then put into the pool later, as long as it's before post time. If 5 minutes before post, United Tote goes down for 2 minutes, all the other racetracks are still taking bets. And then when United Tote gets back up, they all drop their accumulated pools into that host pool. So we keep going. That distributed model is integral and very important in how Tote Systems and Parimutuel operates in North America, indeed in the world. You go to Hong Kong, and Hong Kong Tote goes down, everybody's down.
Mm.
Same in Australia. One tote goes down, they're all down. In North America, we've got a distributed model. And there's, obviously there's some variances to that, but
Okay.
that's
Can you
how it goes.
do you can we talk a little bit about Europe and what because SportsAct is has a large operation in the UK and is from the UK. Do you see any other of the North American operators going into Europe or significantly, either today or in the future?
I really, so when I look at Europe, UK in particular, I see a very mature, very highly developed betting market. You've got betting shops all over the place in the UK, France, and, Amtote spent a year talking to the UK racetrack group.
Mm-hmm.
The Ascot group, the one with the 54 tracks, their name escapes me, not GBI. Maybe it is GBI. Anyway, we spent a lot of time talking to that group about what we do in America, what we can bring to them in the UK, and there's a basic disconnect between a racetrack operator in the UK and a racetrack operator in the US. and that is that the betting has been separated from UK racing, and to some degree, even in France. Whereas in the U.S., the racetrack operator knows that he hosts the pools. He decides what bets are on. He decides what the post-time schedule is going to be. He not only writes the races and conducts the racing, he also conducts the betting.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed with a third-party provider, but that third-party provider is just a systems provider. I, as a racetrack operator, hire the mutual manager, the tellers. I decide when the bets are on. I adjudicate any disputes. I decide what the takeout is going to be. I deal with the regulatory agencies about my betting. Indeed, all the regulatory agencies in America, one of their primary functions is to oversee the betting operators and their conduct. In the UK racetrack operators just run races.
Right.
They almost don't even care what the betting is. That betting is somebody else's. That's William Hill, or that's Tote Pool. We sell a booth to a William Hill so we can sell fixed odds. And Fred does the Tote Pool in his shops over there, but I don't get anything from it, so I don't really care. And it took us a long time to describe to the racing operators in the UK what betting operations really entail. And at the end of the day, they chose INETA to build them a betting solution, and INETA is not even a tote, right? INETA is going to have to go contract with a third-party tote system to process wagers.
Mm-hmm.
And so ultimately, we failed in convincing the UK that what they needed to do was adopt the U.S. model.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't see another opportunity in the next 3 to 5 years for a U.S.-based pari-mutuel operator to penetrate the UK market. Now, in France, I spent 6 months talking to the PNU
Mm-hmm.
and to the PMO. The PMO, the betting operator, the betting operation wing of French racing.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
We spent a lot of time talking to them about how they operate. So the PMU operates the shops and the racing. The PMO, is that what it's called?
Yes. It's on-track
So the
racing.
PMO is the betting operator, and they are like a third-party provider to the PMU. And we were working on a historical horse racing product, but the model is so different, and the PMO is so advanced in their user interface, in their terminal development, and what have you. But their betting system is still, 5 links behind Sport Tech even, in terms of pari-mutuel processing power.
Mm-hmm.
French racing has a very strong appeal, primarily because of the Quintet Plus. They have a very strong appeal among high-volume bettors, but when Amtote tries to connect its high-volume bettors to the PMO system, we overwhelm that system dramatically. And the PMO said, we're going to renovate and remake our pari-mutuel system, and we're going to do 3,000 bets per second. Well, we have individual operators at Amtote that do more than that. The Amtote system can do 50, 60, 70,000 wagers per second in processing.
Mm.
And so the view of the PMO in terms of what they needed to do to be a global operator, was pretty I wouldn't say short-sighted, but was limited. They didn't expand their horizons enough. And they were spending, potentially, they said, 300 million euros to overhaul their system.
Mm-hmm.
And still, we're not to the level that Amtote was. And so there's a big disconnect between what happens in the UK and what happens in the US for pari-mutuel. Now, for fixed odds is a very different game. It's a very different technical solution, or technical requirement, I should say. The fixed odds technical requirement is not as high volume as pari-mutuel. Because of pari-mutuel, the nature of it is that all the bets go into a single pool. That means that a single system has to process and price those wagers
Right.
simultaneously. So there's a gigantic volume issue. It's kind of like looking at a stock exchange. You know, I'm going to buy this stock from this entity at this price, at this volume, and I've got X number of seconds to execute that transaction. And then at the end of that transaction, report the result as a confirmed sale. Even that is not pari-mutuel.
Mm.
But pari-mutuel, I'm selling the same wager at the same time to literally millions of people. And I have to be able to report that transaction in a 15 to 20 second cycle to disparate systems in multiple languages, in a what's the term? Without any mistakes, is what I'm trying to say. You know, with complete integrity. And then at the end of the race, I have to price all that and do it all over again. It's a different dynamic between fixed odds and pari-mutuel. That's
Right.
not to say that fixed odds systems aren't sophisticated, but their sophistication is really around before the wagers close.
Mhm.
The operator of a fixed odds system needs to know what his liability is.
Yeah.
He needs to know where his wagers are coming from. He needs to be able to move his line to manage that liability on both sides of the wager. It's a different dynamic.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got time. In a fixed odds deal, I've got time to confirm that wager. With a teller or a self-service user or a mobile user or an online user, it's submit bet. That bet has to go to the host system, through the client, to the host, back to the client, back to the customer in less than a second. Typically, turnaround times are in the 700 millisecond turnaround time. So if it's 700 to the host and 700 back, at most, I've got a second and a half to confirm that transaction. Because if I don't, then the end customer, the guy who's placing the wager, is sitting there in limbo.
Right.
And he gets disinterested. He gets frustrated. He starts hitting more buttons, or he walks away from the teller. The teller gets hung up. I mean, that delay is unacceptable in pari-mutuel, where in fixed odds, because the wagers close 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes before the game goes off, I've got more time to confirm that wager.
Right.
So I don't see a lot of U.S. penetration in UK necessarily. I do see some penetration in other markets, but in those other third-party markets, if you will, the UK operators are so advanced in their fixed odds offering, and they can bring a acceptable tote offering through their own behalf or through a third-party provider that it's acceptable.
Mm.
And so when you have mixed markets for fixed odds and pari-mutuel, the fixed odds capability is the leading driver. The pari-mutuel capability, because it's lower volume, typically, I'm saying in South Africa, South America, maybe some Eastern European countries, it's acceptable. In East Asia, they have their own pari-mutuel systems they're closed systems. They're within their countries only, specifically,
Mm.
and therefore, you're not going to get into those markets with a pari-mutuel system. And to the extent they ever, if ever, go to fixed odds sports, there's a lot of high volume UK providers that can handle that.
And would somebody like Playtech be would have the technology to develop a toad system or acquire one of the parimutuel players and boost it like you said about Sportec, buy the client portfolio and put technology in it to upgrade its systems. Would do you see Playtech as a player in this field?
Who is that?
Playtech is a
Playtech, yes. Playtech
Right.
could definitely play in that market. Yeah, Playtech is, they have a lot of money in their development shop. Playtech could be a global, if they're not already the number one operator globally, they could be.
But
Stand
we
by 1 second, please.
go
Can
ahead.
you hold on 1 second?
Sure.
Okay, sorry. Hello.
Yes,
I'm
no
working at
problem.
home this morning at home delivery, so that's taken care of.
No problem.
Again, Playtech is a big operator. They could do basically whatever they want. To the extent they want to get into the mutual business, they
Which
can
is
easily acquire
which
a
is
number of systems and develop it.
yes, but which is exactly the bit that we don't see. They're in casino. They're on online games. They've also diversified into stock market terminals. But we don't see them getting into the parimutuel system field.
No, I don't. If I were Playtech, I wouldn't bother with it. I mean, unless you think you can go in and take over some of the Asian markets, Hong Kong, Korea, Japan, Malaysia, Playtech has got bigger volume things in mind, and candidly, parimutuel is so closely tied to horse racing, and horse racing is, let's face it, horse racing has been on the decline for a while. While it's a changing and evolving sport, it's certainly not a growth area. Now, me personally, I believe that parimutuel sports wagering in the sort of the U.S. fantasy model has a lot of merit. I think you could put parimutuel wagering out there as an alternative choice to fixed odds, but most fixed odds operators like the way they operate. They take the risk, they set the lines, they beat the market, and that's the way they like to play. And they a lot of horse players say that the one thing they don't like about horse racing is the fact that the odds can change. I mean, when you look at rules of sports or play, that bet sports or bet horse racing, they say their number one dissatisfaction is, I bet a horse at 2-1, he goes to 2-5 by post time, or I bet a horse at 5-1, he goes to even money at post time. I don't like that. So fixed odds means, of course, that you get the price when you bet it, but it presents a risk position for the operator. The parimutuel business incurred right? Percentage of this bet. I want favorites to win because the favorites are the ones that most somebody gets to cash that, then they bet it against. Pari-mutuel about turn. And so one thing people like a fixed odds is that the operator,
Right. So
operators have different viewpoints.
yes. So you're saying that the differentiation is here to stay between pari-mutuel and fixed odds. Where, if you were a pari-mutuel operator, which country would you go to today, or in the next few years, where do you sense potential?
Well, I think the UK. I mean, the UK, France. I mean, Australia. Overall, I would say Europe and Australia are in the most need of a pari-mutuel upgrade. I mean, the system that Tabcorp has is old. It's going to be expensive to renovate, but there's probably more upside in Australia for a pari-mutuel system than just about anywhere. Because I mean, if you could get Tabcorp to buy your system, which Amtote has been unable to do in the last 5 to 7 years of trying, I mean, that's a big system. I think Tabcorp had contemplated building one themselves. They've contemplated buying one and revamping it or renovating it, but they just haven't been able to take that leap.
Right.
The UK is so heavily dominated by fixed odds in horseplay, but they have so much horse racing. I mean, if you throw France in with the UK, I don't know all the numbers off the top of my head, but France has a fantastic distribution model. They've got great terminals. I think their pari-mutuel system is adequate, but they need to be able to distribute French racing all around the world. And they have, they're limited in their capability to do that. The UK using Sportech and Fred, Betfred, the racetracks there have to change their mentality. They've basically given away their betting product to a third-party operator who's disinterested in horse racing. They send bookmakers to all the shops. They send bookmakers to all the tracks. And Tote in the UK is considered a girls' game. Pardon me, Natalie and Emily. But
no problem.
But you know what I mean? It's like real men bet fixed odds, and all the girls go bet the Tote. When in fact, a smart guy can go play the market. I mean, the market is not as smart as the bookmaker, right? The bookmaker has people dedicated to creating and handicapping the race and creating a number that the bookmaker can make money at. The Tote pool is pure market game, right? There's popularity. If Aidan O'Brien has a horse in 1,000 guineas, he's going to be heavily favored because he's Aidan Bryan. Aidan O'Brien, right? He's won the damn thing a dozen times, and so people flock to that. A savvy player playing the pari-mutuel market can say, well, yeah, Aidan's pretty good, but I don't like his horse today. I think this horse over here at 3-1, which the market doesn't necessarily like, is a better opportunity. So playing that market is what appeals to those high volume guys. It's what appeals to the smart horse players. If you're going to go out there and pick colors and horse names and jockey silks, then it doesn't matter what you're going to play.
Right.
And if you're going to be a horse player playing the tote pool, you're playing in a market just like you're playing a stock market. You're not trying to buy low and sell high, or buy low and cash high. If
Well,
if you're going to go butt up against the William Hills of the world, then you're going to get what you get.
But don't you think that it might be a threat for the interest of the game if professional type players have more means and more data analytics power to place better bets? Then they will take more money from the pool out of the small players, and that would discourage the small players to bet. That's one of the things we hear. Go ahead.
Well, big dogs eat a lot. Small dogs eat a little. But everybody gets to eat.
Right.
I mean, I get the same dividend the big player does. Right?
Well,
in a tote pool, if a horse pays $5 and I've got $100 of it, or the horse pays $5 and I've got 5,000 of it,
well,
getting what we
I'm
get
more.
the return on our investment.
Well, I'm talking about the we've read a number of articles in France and about large players were getting better return on their bets than the average small players, and that was a source of it's not that the return is not the same, it's that they place better bets, so their return on their total bets are better.
If I go buy Apple stock at $100, and 5 years from now it's at $90, or if it's at $500, my dividend is based on how much I play. And I understand what you're saying. I hear that argument a lot. But there's a volume. There are price-sensitive players, and there are non-price-sensitive players. Most players are not price-sensitive, meaning, if I play a horse at 5-1 on the tote pool, and he goes off at 3-1, maybe he's at 3-1 because that high-volume player dropped a big bet, and maybe he dropped a big bet because he's got a rebate coming.
Right.
I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's the way the world works.
Okay.
Now, is that an issue for pari-mutuel system growth globally? Potentially it is. Is that a complaint for the blogomaniacs that like to go on and express their opinions online anonymously and bash the business? Yeah, sure. But in terms of a racetrack operator, I'm taking my percentage from every dollar wagered, and I'm running my business with that takeout.
Right.
Some of that I'm going to give to a big player because if I give him some back, he'll play more, thereby improving everybody's pot.
Right.
Everybody's place in the game. I can pay more purses. If the bigger the pool is, the harder it is for those odds to be adjusted.
No, I understand. I
And I can
understand your
only
point.
get those pools in volume if I've got some of these big players in them. So at the end of the day, the volume players make the markets,
Right.
and they protect the small player from a big odds drop. If I've got a $100,000 win pool versus a $10,000 win pool, that small player is going to benefit from that. Even if the horse pays $5 instead of $7, he's paying $5 instead of $2.
Right. No, I understand your point.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are there any other players or other trends that are notable in this market that we should know about?
Well, I think just to further the conversation we were just having, extending price discounts down to the player level and giving the player more tools to both analyze the market and better tools to handicap with, and thereby make smarter bets is something that is in the development stage.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if I could go to ExpressBet and I could join the ExpressBet program through some subscription model or through some volume model to get me some more tools, I think that would be a very attractive thing. And I think that there are some folks working on that very model.
Okay.
In other words, if I bet $1 million a day, I'm going to get an 8% rebate on certain content. I'm going to get a certain API connection that delivers odds to me in the way that I want to see them.
Right.
I'm going to get access to, maybe a couple more tools that the guy off the street betting on his phone is not going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And by that same token, I need to further develop my mobile tools for that off the street player. The guy who's sitting at home sees TVG on the television or sees NBC doing a New York race. I can just pick up my phone, access my account, or very quickly and easily open an account and fund it. And the better I play, or the more frequently I play, it's that whole deal. It's the whole thing that we see in every other market.
Right.
We need to develop some of those tools in horse racing and specifically in pari-mutuel wagering so that I've got a better look at what the market is actually doing. And I've got an easier path to get my bet in and get a stake in the game.
Right. You were saying when we started this conversation that a lot was going on in in North America. What did you have in mind?
Specifically, the sports wagering development.
Right.
So I'm not sure if you've read any about this, but the U.S. Supreme Court case in Murphy versus NCAA is going to rule on the 1992 PASPA Act, Professional Amateur Sports Protection Act, which limited sports wagering to those 4 states, Nevada and the other 3 minors.
I just received a news alert that says that the Supreme Court decided to rule in favor of New Jersey and remove the federal law banning the sports gambling. Just now.
Well, I've been on the phone. I haven't seen that alert. I'm sure that's what my phone has been ringing off the hook about.
Yes, I suppose it is.
While I've been talking to you, I've had 3 or 4 different phone calls. One from my CEO, one from my regulatory official, and one from my people at the racetrack. So undoubtedly, they're trying to tell me that, hey, it happened. So here we go.
Yeah.
So I think what's going to happen now is that you're going to get. I mean, look, William Hill has established a presence in New Jersey and in Nevada. Sport Paddy Power, Betfair, whatever they're called now. They've got a distribution model that they're going to capitalize on. When I see the details of this decision, then we'll figure out what's next. But there's going to be a lot of activity based on that. It's all going to be around the fixed odds model. And
well, why don't we do the following? It would be interesting for us to have your view on what the decision will change. So, would you mind rescheduling like a shorter phone call later this week?
Yeah. Let's try something Friday, Thursday or Friday.
Okay.
It's going to take me at least that long sort it out.
No, but Friday's fine for us. The same time will work for you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So let's say same time on Friday.
Okay.
And Natalia, do you have any other questions?
No, I think that's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay. Jeff, are there things that questions that we forgot to ask?
I think I'm good. I mean, my impression is that you guys are somehow in the technology business around betting.
Right. And we're trying to understand how this is going to be a game changer and how it'll impact the various players.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be pretty competitive here on out. There are some people that have a bit of a head start. There are some states, because this will be a state-by-state deployment.
Mm-hmm.
New Jersey is at the tip of the spear. There's probably 20 other states that have legislation either pending or already passed based on the federal prohibition going away.
Yes.
So there's going to be, some early action, some early movement, and then there will be some of the bigger states like California, Texas, Florida, New York that watch what others do, that get into a high stakes bidding match for who's going to do the business and how it's going to operate. Because again, at the end of the day, because it's all a risk position, my guess is that Nevada operators are going to have an advantage because the Nevada regulatory environment is the gold standard. What I'm planning to advocate here in my home state of New Mexico, at least my current state of New Mexico, I'm going to advocate that we use the Nevada licensing model as a reciprocal enablement. In other words, if an operator came to New Mexico and did a license with me at my racetrack, if they're already licensed in Nevada, they're good to go in New Mexico. There's no reason for each individual state to erect some new legislative or regulatory or licensing regime. Nevada does the best job of anybody. So if they're licensed in Nevada, they're good to go here. That's going to be my position in New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will likely use a fixed ops provider or operator who already is in the business, who's already taking bets in Nevada, who can extend his lines to me. Maybe he's got a mobile app. Maybe he's got a website. Maybe he already has a terminal model that I can put in place at my locations and just extend what he's already doing. That's going to be the least capital intensive way to deploy the product. It's going to be the least the regulatory path with the least hurdles in it.
Okay, that sounds interesting. The next few weeks will be interesting.
Yes, it'll be.
Well, so maybe we can.
Some folks are calling it the Wild West. I hope it's not that, but it'll be close to that.
Okay. Well, we'll let you go back to return your phone calls, and for now, and we'll be happy to talk to you again on Friday at 4 our time, whatever that was for you.
Yeah, I believe that's 8 a.m. here, which is fine.
Okay. We can make it an hour later if you like, if that's helpful.
No, actually, earlier is better.
Okay.
I need to get on with the day, and
Okay. All right.
I can sit on my back porch and have coffee while we talk.
Okay. Very good. Well, Jeff, thank you very much for all this insight, and have a good weekend. We'll talk again on Friday.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.